Football stadiums in Scotland. I have been to hundreds of them, and my favourite ones are those ones with a little bit of charm, a little bit of character, a little bit rugged, and maybe look like they could fall down at any moment. This isn't to disparage the clubs that have more modern stadiums. I don't really like the non-league cages that don't even really have stands. To be fair to teams like Hamilton and Livingston, I totally understand why they have the kind of facilities they do, and it's probably why, and part of the reason why, they have been successful in the modern era of Scottish football. They've both been in the Premiership. They're just examples of them. But I don't think, from a fan's perspective, you can beat going to stadiums like the ones that are on screen right now. They have so much charm, they have so much character, and when you, like me, like to go and visit different stadiums every week and you like to go ground hopping, then these are genuinely the best ones. And in this video, I'm going to be running you through some of the best, worst stadiums in Scotland. First up is Kell Rovers in Scotland's 9th tier, the West of Scotland Football League Division 3. And look, it's people that call them like the worst stadiums just because of like the way they look sometimes, but I absolutely love them. And as you can see from this one, yeah, it is crumbling a little bit in certain areas. And when I spoke to the chairman, he even mentioned the facilities and stuff, but genuinely love this type of ground. And out of all the ones that I'm going to tell you about today, please put them on your list if you are a ground hopper, or even if you're not, just make sure you go and see football at one or two of them this season if you can. They were formed in 1903, were Kell Rovers, and they play at Nithside Park. Super K, or the Rovers as they are known, are from a coal mining village, or actually two coal mining villages, Kirkconnell and Kellowholme. They are two sort of twin villages that are right next to each other that are just separated by one small bridge. They weren't doing too well when I saw them. I think they were bottom of that league, and they were looking like they could have got relegated to the bottom league should their poor form keep up that season, but there's no official capacity that I could find at this ground. But in terms of these, like, there's league clubs coming up, SPFL clubs. It's obviously like a smaller non-league team, but it's about the sort of feeling that you get when you're there. It's such a great experience going to these places, and it's an adventure, and you never know what you're going to get until you get there. I don't even know what the capacity is. Maybe like a few hundred, 500 maybe at a push, but I doubt that's really been tested for a long time. Next up is the first of our league clubs on this list, and it is Championship side Greenock Morton. Greenock Morton, formed in 1874, are one of Scotland's oldest senior clubs. They're one of a few SPFL clubs on this list, like I say, and they play at Cowdenbeath Park. The capacity is 11,500, with around 5,700 seated. With half seated, half standing, that tells you all you need to know about this ground. They've played here since 1879. And yeah, I just think that when half of it's seated, half of it's terraced, I think that just tells you how sort of old it is. And this stadium is genuinely on this list for the crane alone. And although, yes, opposition fans will go there and they'll probably slate the facilities in certain ways, I don't think that you can beat that view of like the crane and like the old stadium like that. Just in terms of like old stadiums and characterful stadiums, we're so lucky in the UK in general, but Scotland specifically. They've actually won the Scottish Cup, have Greenock Morton, defeating Rangers 1-0 in the 1922 final. And amazingly, the stadium that you're looking at right now has hosted Chelsea in a European competition. Greenock Morton, after finishing 6th in Scotland's top division in the 1967-68 season, qualified for the Intercity Fairs Cup. They drew Chelsea and they lost 5-0 at Stamford Bridge, but only lost 4-3 at Cowdenbeath Park. Cowdenbeath has staged a full international match, Scotland playing against Wales in 1902. Yes, that stadium you're looking at now has hosted an international game. The record attendance was 23,500 for a league deciding match against Celtic in 1922. But this game ended in a riot which caused damage to Cowdenbeath and the surrounding area. A little bit closer to modern times, on October the 3rd, 2013, Cowdenbeath actually hosted a UEFA Youth League match between Celtic and Barcelona, with Barcelona winning 2-1. Antonio Sanabria scored both goals for Barcelona that day. He went on to play for Roma, Real Betis and Torino, and currently has 32 caps for Paraguay. But yeah, Greenock Morton there, what a ground. Again, like in the SPFL, I don't think there are many that even come close to Morton in terms of like history, character, and just that sort of rugged feeling that you get when you go there. Next up in the list of the best worst stadiums in Scotland, a fallen club from the SPFL. They are now a Lowland League club, and that is Cowdenbeath. They've had some great successes as a league club, and they were formed in 1881. They've played at Central Park, the stadium that is on screen right now, since 1917. And they've competed in the top division of the Scottish Football League from 1924 to 1934, but have only completed one top flight season since then, and that was in 1971. Imagine that stadium being a top tier stadium now. All right, that was like 50 years ago, but I mean, you just absolutely love to see it become a top flight stadium these days. Central Park is a multi-use stadium in Cowdenbeath, not just for football, but as you can see from some of the clips here, it's for stock car racing as well. It's situated in the centre of the town, just off the high street in Cowdenbeath, and apparently has a capacity of 4,309. It does feel quite big when you're in there, actually. I mean, I suppose you could get a good few people in there, and I do believe they get more people for the stock cars than they do for the football, sadly, these days. But it used to be a venue for greyhound racing as well for around 40 years, from the 20s to the 60s. A main stand was built in 1921, and a record crowd of 25,500 people attended a Scottish League Cup tie against Rangers between them and Cowdenbeath in 1949. Floodlights were first used there in 1968 in a match against Celtic, and it has held many stock car racing world championships. So yeah, that stadium that you can see right now has hosted world championships. All right, not for football, it's for stock car racing, but just look at it. I mean, again, like a lot of these stadiums, it looks like certain parts of it could do a lot of work, a lot of love, a lot of TLC, but you'll get a completely unique experience when you go and visit all these different grounds. Next up is a team that is very similar to Cowdenbeath in a lot of ways, a fallen SPFL club into the Lowland League. They are currently, at time of recording, playing their first ever non-league season. That is Albion Rovers, who play at Clifton Hill Stadium. They were founded in 1882, and the club joined the Scottish Football League in 1903. I covered them recently and went into a lot of their history, and they had been a Football League club for over 100 years till they were relegated last season, and now they play in the Lowland League this year, obviously. There's an amazing terraced side over the opposite side of the main stand, and there's many rumours as to why it isn't open these days. I've been told it was the width of the stairs, I've been told it just wasn't safe, I've been told the roof was crumbling, I've been told many different things by many different people. I've been told it was just like an overzealous council member who didn't like the look of the stand or something along those lines. Fans, people from the club themselves, like, I've been told many different things about why that stand actually isn't open, which is a real shame because, I mean, just look at it. The main stand and parts of the Airdrie end are the only parts of the ground that are actually open. The Airdrie end is behind one goal. Behind the other goal, you can't even get around there either. So it's behind one goal and that huge, amazing, like, terrace stand that fans actually aren't allowed into. The footprint of the stadium actually feels really big when you're in there as well. And the capacity is apparently like 1,500 now, which, considering the size of the stadium, doesn't feel that much. Like, if they could sort out the stand on the other side and the stand behind the goal, then, like, I'm sure they could get, you know, close to Cowdenbeath numbers, maybe like 4,000 or 5,000 should they need to. But obviously, like, resources are limited for clubs at this level. In terms of, like, Glasgow-based clubs, I know Coatbridge is just outside Glasgow, but if you're thinking of, like, the Glasgow area and, like, surroundings of, like, a 20-30 minute drive, like, it is genuinely one of the greatest in and around that area. I know I've got a lot of people from Glasgow who watch these videos, so if you are and you've never been to Albion Rovers before, make sure you get down there, because just look at it. It's really well branded in a lot of ways as well. There's parts of it that are really nice and really well kept, but there's also parts that are really old and really classic. So yeah, make sure you get down there if you ever get the chance. Rangers fans, I know there's a lot of you who watch my videos, but if you've never been to the non-league Rangers before, make sure you add them to your list. Cambuslang Rangers, founded in 1899, play at Somerville Park with a capacity of apparently, what I could see online, 3,000. But I'm not sure you'd want to get 3,000 in there at the moment. Maybe for safety reasons. I'm not sure it could hold that many in the modern day. I'm not sure when they last would have had that many in there. But in 1904, Cambuslang Rangers moved to their new home ground, Somerville Park, which has remained their home ever since. Since 1904. They have played there. And Cambuslang Rangers used to attract big crowds for most of the 20th century, with as many as tens of thousands of people attending each week. Obviously, times have changed a little bit since then. These supporters were mainly local employees of a neighbouring local business, Hoover. However, since Hoover's liquidation, the crowds have been impacted at Somerville Park. In more recent times, the club have had attendances of around 200 per home game, and that's probably what they had when I went to see them play last season. But apparently the record attendance of that ground is 13,500, which is just mad. And although they are the non-league Rangers, as I called them, they're so similar to Rangers. Their badge, their colours, the fact that Rangers is in their name, a lot of the links with the club, former coaches and stuff. Andy Gorham was there as a coach before he sadly passed away. But although all the Rangers links exist, Bobby Murdoch, one of the Lisbon Lions, actually played at Cambuslang Rangers. So yeah, Bobby Murdoch, huge Celtic legend, played at Cambuslang Rangers. There are a lot of stories where Celtic and Rangers merge, and that is one of them. We're digressing a little bit from the ground, but yeah, as you can see, like parts of it look like they could do again with a little bit of work, a little bit of love, a little bit of TLC. Obviously, resources are limited at these clubs, but I like the fact that we have stadiums like this in Scotland. They're right on your doorstep. They've got character. They're completely different to the stadiums that you'll visit week in, week out in the top divisions. Make sure you add Cambuslang Rangers to your list. The last stadium on this list is an SPFL club, and it is Queen of the South in Dumfries and Galloway. Dumfries and Galloway, the football in that region itself has been struggling a lot in recent years. From what I've heard from people at South of Scotland clubs, I've made videos in that actual league itself. I've spoken to fans of Queen of the South recently. I've spoken to Dalbeattie fans and people at Dalbeattie Star. They went down from the Lowland League to the South of Scotland League. South of Scotland League is strange. It's smaller than the West or the East, but in terms of that whole region, Queen of the South are the big boys in that region. They're currently in SPFL League 1, but in 2008, they lost their Scottish Cup final, which they got to against Rangers. And it was quite a tight final in the end, and Rangers were actually European finalists that year. Because Queen of the South got to the final, they qualified for Europe and played FC Nordsjælland, but they played it at Airdrie, possibly because of Palmerston Park not being up to UEFA standards. And I suppose in a lot of ways that'd probably ring true even now. I don't make these videos to be negative. I really want to paint these clubs in a positive light, and I love these stadiums. Again, I'll drum it home one more time. The character and the old feel of these stadiums is amazing, but I mean, if you're qualifying for Europe and you can't even play your games at your ground, then I suppose that says something about the stadium, doesn't it? But yes, it has been home to Queen of the South since 1919, so over 100 years now. The stadium has a capacity of over 8,000, with under 4,000 being seated, so over half the stadium you'd have to stand in. So Palmerston Park was officially opened in 1919 when Queen of the South were formed, although football has been played there since the 1870s on that actual site. The site was an old farm, and Queen of the South actually sold a lot of their players to fund the purchase of Palmerston in 1921 for £1,500. There have been times where parts of the stadium had to be closed because of safety certificates, but I think Queen of the South did the work to get them sort of reopened again. The Portland Drive Terrace has a capacity of 3,300. It's a traditional standing area and is now the largest area of covered terracing in Scotland, and it is reminiscent of all British grounds prior to the Hillsborough disaster. But yeah, look at that. Even in the SPFL, you got clubs who recently were in the Scottish Cup final, who have qualified for Europe, who are now in League 1, obviously Queen of the South, but they make it on this list. Greenock Morton, obviously Championship, but I don't think you get experiences at the big clubs like you get at these small ones. You can get a pie, you can stand in the terrace, and you can maybe go and find a seat somewhere else as well if you can get round to certain areas of the ground. It's a lot more of a different experience, but a really, really fun one as well. Again, in no way, shape or form do I want these videos to come across as negative. I speak to people all the time about these certain stadiums, and like when you bring up Capello Park or something like that, they go, oof. Especially rival fans of these clubs, they'll call it a or whatever, but I really want to paint these grounds in positive lights. I think, again, you just don't get experiences like this at big clubs. The small grounds are amazing, they have character, so make sure you add them to your list. And again, I don't want to take away from the clubs who have more modern facilities as well. I mentioned Hamilton, I mentioned Livingston, I mentioned Falkirk as well, maybe. Like, I get why they have modern grounds, and it has taken them to a next level, I suppose, in a lot of ways, and they can train on there, they can rent it out, they can make money from it. But do the modern grounds have the soul and the character and the heart like these old classic ones do? I don't think so. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please let me know if you've ever been to any of these grounds before, or if you plan on going to any in the future. If there's any old classic grounds that I've missed off this list, let me know and I'll make sure that I cover them in a video very, very soon. I'm going to leave some videos on screen from when I've been to some of these clubs. I'm not sure which one's in my mind when I'm filming this right now, what they'll be, but I'll leave a couple on screen from some of the classic grounds. Maybe it'll be Cambuslang Rangers or Morton or Queen of the South. But yeah, do click on one of these videos now if you want to see more from these classic old grounds. Thank you so much and goodbye.